Hey guys, and welcome back to everydAI, the channel where we talk about how you interact with artificial intelligence in your everyday life. This week we're talking about a really interesting report on how Americans feel about artificial intelligence. Unsurprising spoiler, no one trusts Facebook with anything, and we'll get more into that later. This survey asked about 5 main categories: general attitudes towards artificial intelligence, public opinions on AI governance, the US-China relationship and AI policy, workplace automation, and high-level machine intelligence, which in this case means AI that can replicate human functions or human tasks in ways comparable to humans, so with that same level of nuance. Think Google Duplex. If you're interested in reading the report, which is written by the Center for Governance of AI at the University of Oxford, I've included the link down here, and it's also in the description for you to check out. Starting with general attitudes towards AI, people were asked about how they felt about AI developments in the following areas. Overall, Americans had pretty mixed opinions on further development of AI, with on average people supporting it, but by a pretty small margin. Unsurprisingly, at least to me, people were a lot more likely to support AI development if they were wealthy, male, not religious, had a technical background, so had taken CS classes or taken programming classes, or went through a 4-year college. They were also more likely to support AI development if they were millennials or Generation Z, which I still don't know which one I am. I was born in 96, someone tell me which one I am. And Democrats were more likely to support AI. The last one was a little bit surprising to me. I don't normally think about political affiliations when I think about who would support AI. And so I'd definitely be interested in hearing your thoughts and just learning more about that in general. Now, most of these groups weren't super surprising to me, given that people who would be affected by workplace automation, which we'll talk about in a second, wouldn't be these groups. They wouldn't be wealthy people. They probably wouldn't be people who have gone through 4-year colleges recently, so young people. Or at the very least, they'd be people who grew up with the expectation that this was going to happen. They grew up as things were being automated, and so it's not something that they'd be particularly concerned about. Similarly, the vast majority of Americans think that AI should be carefully managed. Now, this question doesn't touch on who should be managing it, which we'll get to in the next section, but it does say some good things about the fact that we do think that AI should be governed and managed by something or some entity. Really interestingly, this survey had people rank AI against other global risks. So how likely is AI to cause a catastrophe in the next 10 years or so? And if you look at this chart, apparently we're a lot more worried about cybersecurity, cyber threats, natural disasters, and weapons of mass destruction, which are all concerns, especially natural disasters in the US recently. We're also very worried about the possible implications of climate change. That's good, we should be. And then lastly, for this section, they asked about what people considered to be AI and what they didn't, and this was a really interesting question. So they had people basically say, given Facebook photo tagging, given automation in the workplace, given autonomous cars, which of these are AI and which of them aren't? And so things that are a little more obvious, machine learning diagnostics, autonomous cars, those were all considered AI, but things like Facebook's face tagging, no. Things like voice assistants, not as much. Things like Google searching or your Netflix recommendations, people don't think are AI, which is interesting to see where people do and don't see AI in their lives, and something that I've been working on in this channel. Okay, so let's get into some of the specifics. We know that Americans think that management of AI is important. Specifically, we're concerned about data privacy, surveillance, AI-enhanced cyber attacks, and digital manipulation. So in other words, fake news and personal privacy. Who do we trust to prevent these things? Well, in order, Americans trust university researchers and the US military, scientific organizations, the Partnership on AI, which contributed to the development of this report and is an organization that looks to avoid an AI arms race, which we'll talk about a little bit later, tech companies, excluding Facebook, intelligence organizations, so like the CIA, US federal and state governments, the United Nations, and then Facebook. Now, this is kind of hilarious to me. It's not surprising given the last year of Facebook in the media. I don't think a lot of people have a positive opinion of Facebook, even though we all still use it. But it's just so interesting. They go on to say that apparently we all trust Apple, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Yahoo, which has lost our data who knows how many times more than Facebook. So Facebook is not in a good place when it comes to public opinion and artificial intelligence. Looking at workplace automation, it turns out that Americans don't think that AI will disrupt the job market in the near future. This is odd, because we know that it will at this point, and we know that it has. So if we look at AI and robotics, more so robotics than AI at the moment, we've seen that automation has disrupted the job market. It's disrupted factory workers or people who do repetitive tasks that can be replaced by robots. You see that in car manufacturing, you see that in most factory work. So it's surprising to me that we don't see more people thinking that it will disrupt the job market. The people who conducted the study are guessing that we're used to it, or that we think that it will disrupt the job market, but we will adapt and things will stabilize. But for me, that doesn't really explain how that doesn't disrupt the job market. I don't know. It's an interesting question. Looking at global development of AI, which is something that we don't talk about that much, most of the respondents thought that China was doing better than the US on AI. Now, to take a step back, the US and China are basically considered the global leaders on AI development. The US is actually ahead of China in research and development. So it's not surprising that people don't know a lot about the US-China relationship when it comes to AI. I think that that's just something that isn't in the news that much. But it was really interesting that we think that China's doing better than us, given that we don't know much about it. On the upside, there's been a lot of concern in tech journalism about the AI arms race, where the US and China will begin to, or are currently, but will continue to invest more and more in artificial intelligence for the military. And most of the respondents thought that the US should invest in AI for the military, but should also work to cooperate with China to avoid such an arms race so that we don't come into conflict with each other, which I totally agree with. Lastly, looking at high-level machine intelligence, things like duplex that can replicate everyday human tasks, we have very mixed feelings on whether or not they're a good thing and whether or not we will have such high-level machine intelligence in the next 10 years. What we do think is that it's probably not going to be good for us, with a third of the people responding to the survey thinking that it's going to do more harm than good, and most people having a mixed opinion on the topic. So this was a really interesting survey for me, but I want to know what you guys think. As with all surveys, you're looking at a limited group of people, so you're not necessarily getting all the opinions, and as people who watch videos about artificial intelligence, I'm curious to see where you guys stand on a lot of these issues. If you want to see me cover more topics like this, you should definitely subscribe and smash that like button so that I know that you liked it. And otherwise, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.